Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Sarah Garrett-Gasson, in for Jim Ninsel, and welcome to our weekly commentary and analysis on local and state affairs. On tonight's show, state legislators put Arizona in the spotlight nationally again, this time with a bill that would let businesses refuse to serve gay people based on religious belief grounds. And is the Tucson City Council trying to balance its budget on the backs of bus riders? Pima County decides to move a road to protect the area's largest private employer. All that and more on AZ Illustrated Politics. But first, a look at today's top stories.
Late yesterday, the Arizona House passed SB 1062, a bill allowing refusal of service based on religious convictions. Today, Republican gubernatorial candidates Scott Smith and Christine Jones both urged Governor Jan Brewer to veto the proposal, as did Democratic candidate for governor Fred Duvall and Democratic Congressman Ron Barber and Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick. From Washington, D.C., Governor Brewer called the bill controversial, but did not indicate which way she's leaning. She has 5 days from when she receives the bill to act on it. Meanwhile, parts of the business community, including the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, are urging the governor to veto the bill, fearing a backlash, including canceled events and conferences. The Arizona Game and Fish Department released photos today of another newborn bighorn in the Santa Catalina Mountains. This is the third lamb born to the reintroduced herd. 12 adult bighorns have been killed since 31 were reintroduced late last year. 11 of those were killed by mountain lions. Game and fish officials killed 2 mountain lions. And a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee is recommending the Pima County Board of Supervisors consider putting a bond question before voters in November to fund the overhaul of the Pima County Animal Shelter. And that's a look at tonight's headlines.
Ukraine's president and opposition leaders signed an agreement today aimed at stopping the bloody upheaval that has gripped their nation. Those are just some of the stories we're covering on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Tonight, Arizona Week with Lorraine Rivera focuses on proposed budget cuts to the Air Force A-10 fighter program. What effect would the proposed cuts have on Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and southern Arizona?
It's the best close air support aircraft we have, bar none. Our troops on the ground depend on it. It's an essential part of our national security assets. We must keep it.
That's tonight at 8:30 on PBS 6.
The Religious Freedom Restoration Act was passed by both houses of the state legislature in swift action this week. The legislation is awaiting action by Governor Jan Brewer, and it has thrust the state into the national spotlight, with advocates of civil rights, business, and religious rights all weighing in. Joining me to discuss the situation and its broad implications are Mark Evans, the editor of the Inside Tucson Business, and Andrea Kelly, Arizona Public Media government reporter. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Sarah.
Andrea, could you please catch us up to speed on where this bill stands, what it means, and what we're waiting for to happen?
Sure. As you said in your intro, it's 2 separate bills, but they do the exact same thing. Arizona already has a law that protects people against government intrusion onto their freedom of religion and exercise of that religion. So what this bill does that made it through the House and the Senate this week is expands that provision to include private actions. So it protects private people from any intrusion into their exercise of religion by government or by anyone else. And so it's a controversial bill, and some of the big issues are whether this is actually going to encourage discrimination or whether it fosters more religious freedom. That's sort of the 2 sides we're looking at here. As I said, and as you said, both chambers passed the bill this week. So soon it will be sent to Governor Brewer's desk. It hasn't been yet sent to her. Once it gets there, she'll have 5 days to decide whether to pass it, sign it into law, or veto it.
Do you expect that it will face some sort of legal challenge if Brewer does decide to pass it?
Well, the ACLU, which has sued on other bills, including SB 1070, has said they're going to study the bill and they'll make a decision later, but the expectation is that they will. This bill there's a couple of reactions to this bill, and they're both emotional. One is a nation that's founded on equality. It's like in the first sentence, or one of the first 2 sentences of the Declaration of Independence. And then the nation would then tore itself apart over equality, from some people wanting to treat other people as lesser beings. To have a bill like this that would allow you to treat other people as somehow lesser beings has provoked a very emotional response from people who think that that's wrong. At the same time, for conservative Christians, they feel the ground crumbling underneath their feet with the normalization of gay relationships and homosexual relationships. And so they are the party in power, and this is kind of their response. They're kind of fighting back to what they see as an attack on their personal right to believe these things. And so I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a challenge to the law, and you're going to get probably a split decision, much like we got in SB 1070. You had a case of the Supreme Court just a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago, called Hosanna Tabor versus EEOC, in which the Supreme Court said that religious institutions could have some discriminatory practices in their hiring for people when they're conducting business. And conservative Christian scholars saw that ruling, and they kind of tried to move the goalpost in a little bit, and so they're promoting these bills in several states. It's not just here, but it's also
It was in Kansas, right?
Kansas and in Oregon and a couple of other states. Now, it hasn't gone anywhere else in these other states. We're the first one to get it through the legislature and now up to the governor. So, I don't think it's going to be cut and dry that this will be struck down. There may be part of it is struck down for people who are in business and providing the public accommodation, which is protected for sexual orientation in both federal and state law. But maybe the churches may still be able to have these discriminatory practices. So we'll see what happens, but I do expect a legal challenge.
So Andrea, what would you like to add?
Well, I just want to mention that Arizona already has some laws on the books that protect pharmacists and doctors from carrying out a practice that they believe is against their religion. And namely, those bills were written to deal with things like the morning after pill or birth control or abortions. So, and those have been upheld. So there are some cases where people having a right to make religious decisions in the conduct of business have been upheld in Arizona. This bill is written pretty vaguely, and so it's not clear, what the first challenge, how the first challenge will come if it is signed into law. But that's a little bit of precedent.
Mark, could you, from your position at Inside Tucson Business, tell us a little bit about what you're hearing from business concerns?
So the business community is very up in arms over this because we just went through the impact of SB 1070, which did have a deleterious effect on the economy of the state. Now, how much of an effect we had, we're not really sure, because it happened at the same time we were trying to come out of a very, very deep recession. But you've got the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, several others in Phoenix have all sent letters to the governor pleading for her to veto this bill or to veto the bill. So the business community is very concerned. This could have very big repercussions for the tourism, for the convention business. I mean, we saw all those conventions that got canceled after SB 1070. We'll probably see similar cancellations if this law is signed. So and we're just getting the economy back going in Arizona. I mean, we've lagged the national economy's recovery, and we're now kind of getting going. And we were, a lot of people were hoping for a big year. I mean, we just had 2013 where the sales tax revenue was very high, pre-recession numbers. And so to have something like this, they're very concerned about it.
One thing that I'm wondering about, and I'm sure other people are too, is how the logistics of this. How do you prove that the religious belief that you're holding and that you're citing as a reason to refuse to do business with someone? How is that measured? How is that tested? Is that brought up in the legislation anywhere? I mean, I'm thinking of a situation where someone who might, you say you're a conservative Christian and you don't want to, like the situation in New Mexico that sort of spurred this, you don't want to photograph a same-sex wedding, but then you have family members who are gay or lesbian. How would any of this work out? Andrea, could you talk about that?
So the law specifically says, it's a bill, it's not law yet, specifically says that the person's action or refusal to act in providing services to someone has to be motivated by a religious belief, that belief is sincerely held, and that the action of forcing them to do business with somebody would substantially burden their exercise of freedom of religion. So it is unclear. How do you prove that, and what lengths do you go through to prove that this is a sincerely held religious belief, and that it's not a gray area anywhere else, is, I think, going to be the heart of any court case that comes of this.
So put yourself in the position of a judge, for instance, with the case in New Mexico, which prompted all this, in which a gay couple went to a florist and wanted him to do the flowers for their wedding, and he refused, and they sued him. And so this is what this is a reaction to. So if you're a judge, or if you feel that someone has wronged you because of your sexual orientation, and you sue that person, then the judge is put in the position of trying to figure out what a sincerely held religious belief is. Well, if I was a judge, I wouldn't want to be in that, because how do I judge sincerity? What's the test for that?
Right.
And so I think this is going to cause, this would be very problematic for judges. The part of the debate, the Democrats tried to stop this. They brought up a number of amendments in the Senate. And they brought up the parade of horribles. What if this happens? Or a Satanist could then deny the services to a Christian and things like that. And I think it does open the door for all kinds of ridiculous assertions, some by people who are trying to prove the absurdity of the law in the first place.
It reminds me of a case that Arizona had many years ago, and it was a long-running case where a couple, a married couple, had said that it was their religious belief that they should smoke marijuana. And the state had this long battle about whether that could be a religion, whether that's a religiously held belief, whether they could be prosecuted under state law for having what is a federally and at that time 100% illegal in the state drug. And I believe the couple ended up losing at the Supreme Court, although I don't quite remember if it went all the way that high. But it reminds me of that case. What is a religion? Right. What does it mean to have a religious belief, and how do you get there? That's going to be the heart of the judge's decisions.
And also, I think the one question to think about is, who defines Christianity? Who says I think homosexuality is a sin, and therefore that's a Christian belief, whereas many Christians say, no, that's not a Christian belief. It just seems like there's a lot of area to just get into some dicey issues. Do you think that the governor will sign this?
Well, that's what everybody wants to know. It's likely that she probably will just let it become law by not signing it. She's not running for election. Right. So it can't be held over her head for the election. And she is a very religious woman. And so it may be something that she believes and will sign. We just don't know. She's so quiet about these things. She never speaks about legislation until it actually gets on her desk, and you have no idea what's going to happen until she does it.
And Andrea, she vetoed a similar bill last year, but the situation was different. Can you talk about that?
Yes, she did veto a similar bill. The language was slightly different, but the reason she vetoed it actually did not have much, if anything, to do with the content of the bill. If we remember last year, there was a big fight about whether or not the state should expand its Medicaid program for the poorest residents' health insurance. And the governor at one point said, she drew a line in the sand and said, I'm not going to sign any bills that you send me until we work out this Medicaid situation. This religious freedom bill is one of the bills that got to her desk during that moratorium. So in her letter to lawmakers about why she vetoed it, she cites, I told you I wasn't going to sign anything until we work out this Medicaid situation, and she vetoed it. So it's really hard to say that whether that's an indication of what she's going to do, because it was a totally different situation and she didn't really comment on the content of the bill.
Well, I'm thinking back to the SB 1070 immigration situation where the business leaders got involved in that, and then some subsequent anti-legal immigration legislation that the business leaders across the state came together and said, no, we're not, this is not okay, you're harming the state. Do you think that their sway with what they're doing now and speaking up against this will ultimately have any effect, Mark?
Well, the business community did have some effect after SB 1070 went into law, when the then Senator Russell Pierce and some others tried with their policy of attrition, where they were trying to pass onerous bills that would make it difficult to be in the state if you were an illegal immigrant, in a way to try and force them to leave. And after SB 1070, the reaction to it, and when these new bills were introduced, 2011, in 2012, the business community really stepped up and said, hey, you need to tone it down. And so then those bills ended up dying in committee. And similar bills since then have been dying in committee and not getting out of the legislature. So I think the business community has learned its lesson, and they're not going to they're going to try harder at the beginning, because they were rather silent about it in 2010 when SB 1070 was being considered.
One other thing that's happened this week up in the legislature, just to sort of shift gears a bit, they addressed dark money. Mark, could you tell us a bit about, when we hear the words dark money, and I think of Star Wars and all the rest of it, but could you talk about what is dark money and what did the Senate committee do this week?
So Citizens United removed the caps on expenditures from independent committees and issue advocacy groups so that they can spend as much money as they want to advocate for certain issues. And they can do it through 501c4s, which are these nonprofit groups, but they have to exist for a public good. They can't, in order to have their tax exemption, they can't exist solely for politics. And so what you've seen is this explosion of these legal fictions of these 501c4 groups, in which, all across the country, in which just tons of money has been being poured into them. And they have affected races all across the country, state and even some local races. You saw dark money in the Phoenix City Council races last year. Dark races heavily affected the 2012 congressional races in this state, as well as some of the propositions. The one that would have changed the way we do primaries in the state got a bunch of dark money. And so there's a bill, and dark money has fundamentally changed politics in states. If you were running, before there was clean elections law, even after clean elections law, if you were running for office in Arizona, you had to go to the business community because they had the money. And you had to go to them and say, here's my platform, please give me money so that I can run for office. Well, now, if you go to the business community, they might be able to give you $20, $50, $60, and maybe $100,000. Meanwhile, some billionaire is funneling money in through a dark money program where they're outspending you 10 to 1.
So what did the committee do this week? So
the committee at the legislature, from a bill put up by Michelle Regan, who is a Phoenix Republican, would require disclosure. So even though a disclosure of where the money is coming from. The problem with it is that Arizona can only enforce the laws within the state, and most of this money is coming from other 501c4s. What they've learned how to do is, rather than have an individual who gives money to the 501c4, then you say, well, who gave you that money? And you find out who the individual is. The individuals are giving the money to a 501c4, gives it to a 501c4, and it moves all around the country. And then when they say, well, where did this money come from? Well, it came from this other committee. And the state has no power to force another state to reveal who the donors were. And that was one of the problems with the Prop 204 issue in 2012. And we ended up finding out that the money that affected the California race was coming out of Arizona. But that has been the exception rather than the rule. It has really changed the nature of campaigns in the states. So I'm all for disclosure. I believe that you should have the courage of your convictions. If you want to spend money to affect an election, put your name on it. I think it's rather cowardly to hide the money and try and affect these elections in other states, and so no one knows that you're doing it. And I would hope that this disclosure law actually makes it through the legislature. I think all of the legislators are concerned about the effect of dark money in their own races, even though sometimes they benefit from it.
Right. Shifting gears locally, let's talk about the Tucson City Council and the bus. Bus fares, a perennial issue here in Tucson. Andrea, I know you've been covering this very closely. What's the latest?
So on Wednesday, the Tucson City Council decided to take a proposal to raise bus fares out to public comment. So in the next couple of months, people will have the opportunity to go to some public meetings or email comments in to talk about this proposal to raise bus fares. So the basic proposal is to take the regular one-way bus fare from $1.50 to $1.75, and to take the economy fare for lower income residents from 50 cents to 65 cents starting in July of this year. And then the increases would also affect monthly passes, day passes, any other kind of passes you can get would also see an increase. So that's the gist of the proposal going to the public. And then related to it, there's also this plan or proposal to increase bus fares by small amounts about every 2 years. And the point of that would be to give people, the council members say, to give people some insight into what the effect is going to be so they can plan for increases
More
instead of
predictability.
predictability and stability a little bit so that the increases are smaller as they go. Those are separate decisions. So the City Council is going to revisit this issue after the public comment period closes, probably take a vote in May or June. They have to vote before the end of the fiscal year, and whatever they decide would take effect July 1st.
And this is in response in part to a budget situation with the city budget. Can you give us some information about that?
We'll start with the big number. The city overall, as a whole, is about $33 million in the red going into the next fiscal year in July. And that's the general fund, basically the fund that pays for most of the services that we use. So $33 million deficit that they have to close, the council has to close before the end of the fiscal year. And this is just one piece of that puzzle. So the council was looking to find about $6 million of savings in the SunTran bus system. The proposal that they're looking at for bus fares would bring in, they think, about $2.4 million of that goal of $6 million. Then there's another proposal to reroute and restructure some of the bus routes to make those more efficient, to reduce duplication on routes, especially when the streetcar comes online. That is also expected to raise another or help fill that deficit by another $2.4 million. So they've identified $4.8 million in savings out of a goal of $6 million from the transit system toward filling the $33 million deficit.
So, Mark, briefly, I know that yes, the city budget is it seems like we just see the same play over and over. We have this giant hole and then it gets changed. And can you talk about a bit about, do you expect this $33 million figure to hold, or do you think it's going to be chiseled away as we get closer?
Well, it has to be, because they have to have a balanced budget. It's the state law. So the problem that the city has had since the collapse of the economy, the city funds its general fund, which pays for police, firefighters, the parks, and general services. When you live and die, when you live by a sales tax, you die by a sales tax. So when you have a reduction in the economy, you have an immediate reduction in sales tax. And it really hit the city's budget hard, because then you also had the state pulling back its shared revenues at the same time. And so what the city has been doing over time in order to balance its budget is, one, it did a bunch of layoffs or attrition layoffs by not hiring people, and it reduced its workforce by about 1,000. But then it also started kicking a whole bunch of financial cans down the road. Refinancing debt, borrowing from this agency or that agency, delaying these bills and that bills. Well, they've run out of road.
I just had this vision of road with all these potholes and these cans falling into it.
Well, so they got to the end. They've gotten to the end of the road now, and for the last several years, every January they do a financial. They have to have an audit, and every January they hear the audit, and every January the city's finance staff gives them the city council its estimation of the things that keep them up at night. And they've been saying that the general fund has been structurally unbalanced for the last 5 years, that there is more dedicated spending than there is revenue, even with the increases in the sales tax revenue that's occurred in the city with the rebound in the economy. And so the city has now reached the point where they've got to pay up. They just agreed to give like $11 million in raises. That affected their ability to handle this deficit. So how they're going to solve it, the city manager's gone through and ranked every department. I think rather than cut pay or cut staff, they're going to try and decide to toss some programs out of the boat. And the problem is that every one of those programs has a constituency and probably a council member who supports it. So
and one of the things that is the biggest constituency, I think, are roads, because it affects everyone. Shifting to the county, Andrea, could you tell us a bit about what the county did with the Hughes Access Road, which is the road that goes to Raytheon, which is the area's largest private employer?
Something that Pima County Administrator Chuck Huckleberry has been pushing for years is to move that road. Move it, I think it's about a half a mile to the south of where it sits now. And as you said, the road primarily serves Raytheon.
Right.
It's how people get there. And so the Pima County Board of Supervisors voted 4-1 on Tuesday of this week to go ahead and make that move. It's going to cost $13 million. And the point of the move is to give Raytheon a little more space, a little more buffer to do its work. There's also some other benefits. Tucson International Airport can add another runway. And the overarching goal, or the overarching reason for moving that road, is to try and convince Raytheon not to move to another place if the next time it's looking for expanding its facilities. And that really, the ante was kind of upped on that when Raytheon decided to move some of its facilities or to open a new facility in Alabama instead of expanding in Tucson. So that's kind of the background to it. And as I said, it was a split vote. Pima County Supervisor Allie Miller voted against the move.
And that was part of a bigger picture sort of road discussion. What is the status of that when we look countywide at these road projects?
So last year, the county decided to spend $5 million from the general fund, as opposed to from specifically the transportation department, to work on fixing up the roads. As you said, it's something everybody is concerned about in this metro area. So the discussion Tuesday, the rest of this discussion Tuesday, was about exactly where to spend that $5 million, exactly how to spend it. County staff came up with a list of priorities. Where should the money be spent and what the projects should look like? And part of the discussion was whether some of those priorities were accurate, whether the supervisors wanted money spent somewhere else. And it became a really heated political discussion. Supervisor Miller wanted to spend money in different parts of her district, the Northwest Side, District 1, and the rest of the board voted to keep the original list for her district, not to expand the roads that would get service in her district. And then if there was any money left over, which was predicted, the extra money from her district would get spent over in Vail on the southeast side of town. And she felt like that was political retribution for her criticism of county spending in the last several months, several years, even before she took office. So that's what happened with the other road spending. But the $5 million was already planned to be spent. And also Allie Miller was asking for finding other sources of funding to use on the roads. So she was looking at just kind of the city's looking for money to fill its budget, and she was looking in the county, where can we pull from other programs to pay for road work? One of her suggestions was reducing the county's contribution to the University of Arizona Medical Center South. We used to know it as Keno Hospital. Things like that, pulling money that she thinks could better be spent on roads.
So I think that is something definitely that will affect everyone. We're all affected by roads, and it's interesting when politics so blatantly kind of gets into the, yes, you're going to get this, no, you're not. So I wanted to say thank you very much to both you, Mark and Andrea, for being here.
It was fun.
And we will be right back. And that's our show for today. Learn more about politics by visiting news.azpm.org or by following us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for watching another edition of AZ Illustrated Politics. I'm Sarah Garrett Gasson.